My mom, in her 60s, wanted to force a reconciliation between me, 32, and my sister, 28, but it backfired. I don't know if I want her in my life anymore. It all started when I was 16, when I first began dating my brother's best friend. A lot of people thought it was just a teenage fling, but for me, it was real. We were together until I graduated high school, and by then, it seemed like we were a perfect match. He proposed to me just before my high school graduation, but I rejected it. I didn't want to settle for something just because it was expected. My parents tried to convince me to reconsider, but I was firm in my decision. It wasn't easy, though. The pressure was immense. My family had made plans for the wedding, and it seemed like everything was mapped out for us. I had always been close to my brother, who was 34 at the time, and he took my decision particularly hard. He didn't understand why I rejected a man who, in his mind, had been practically family for years. The tension between my brother and me became so palpable that we barely spoke for months. My sister, on the other hand, was a different story. She couldn't understand why I wouldn't marry my ex. She was convinced that he was the perfect match for me. To her, it was a given that we were meant to be together. So when I made it clear that I didn't want to marry him, she took it as a personal betrayal. Her obsession with the idea of us being together only grew, and she began pushing us back together in any way she could. She started arranging blind dates for me, tried to set us up in awkward social situations, and even went as far as booking hotel rooms for holidays where we'd both be staying. I remember being on the verge of tears during one holiday dinner when I realized that my ex was still being invited to family gatherings, even though I'd made it clear that I didn't want to be around him. It was overwhelming. My ex was constantly around, and I was expected to just accept it. I felt like I was drowning in my family's expectations. But the final straw came when I met someone else. I had decided to study abroad during college, and it was there, during a semester abroad, that I met my now husband. We clicked instantly. The chemistry was undeniable, and I felt like I was finally meeting someone who truly understood me. After a year of dating, we were engaged. The happiness I felt was overshadowed, however, by my sister's reaction. She dismissed my feelings, insisting that I was just in a honeymoon phase. She told me I would grow out of it, just like all the others who had fallen in and out of love. I tried to ignore it, but it was impossible to keep quiet when she started actively pushing for me to reconcile with my ex. It felt like every time I turned around, my sister was there, trying to create opportunities for us to get back together. I could see it in her eyes. Her fixation on the idea of me and my ex being together was obsessive, and it was suffocating. After countless arguments and fights, I set a boundary. I told my sister that if she kept pushing for us to reunite, I would stop talking to her altogether. I didn't want to live in a world where my family felt like they could decide who I should be with. But even after that, things didn't change. It all came to a head when I found out that she had made me her maid of honor in her wedding, and had arranged for me to spend the entire time with the bridal party, one of whom, unbeknownst to me, was my ex. That was the breaking point. At her wedding reception, I watched as my sister's friend, someone she had set up to be my husband's date, tried to make a move on him. My sister's explanation was chilling. She said, "Since you're not married yet, it's okay to explore things with other people." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was as if nothing mattered to her except her need to control my life. I left the party that night, and the next day, I spoke with my parents. I told them that I was done. I would never speak to my sister again if they continued to try and fix things between us. My mom was devastated. She cried, begged, and tried to negotiate with me. But my dad and brother were on my side. They respected my decision and backed off. For 6 long years, I had no contact with my sister. No phone calls, no texts, no family gatherings. She tried everything, from sending gifts to throwing tantrums, but I refused to respond. I couldn't. It was too painful. I couldn't forget the way she had tried to manipulate me and the way she'd treated my relationship with my husband. At family gatherings, I would act as if she didn't exist. And for a while, it worked. She stopped trying to get under my skin. But it was clear that she wasn't truly done with me. When I announced that I was pregnant with my first child, everything came rushing back. My mom, in her excitement about becoming a grandmother, immediately jumped to the conclusion that I would make things right with my sister for the sake of my child. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. The day my mom asked me to meet her for tea, I knew something was off. I could feel it in my gut. When I arrived at her house, I was taken aback to see my sister's car parked outside. I had hoped for a peaceful conversation, but instead I walked into a trap. My sister, her husband, my ex, and his mother were all there, ready for an intervention. It was an ambush. They accused me of being childish and unreasonable. My ex's mother insisted that I had hurt my sister, who only wanted the best for me. It felt like everyone in the room had forgotten who I was and what I had endured. And then, to my horror, my brother-in-law had the audacity to tell me that I was a hurtful person, especially now that I was going to be a mother. He told me I needed to act like an adult. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I sat there stunned as my mother began reading a letter she had written, talking about how hurt she was that her daughters weren't close. She tried to make it sound like my sister was well-meaning, but it was clear that she was still blinded by her obsession with making me reconcile with my ex. Then my sister read her letter. She cried, and as she spoke, I could hear the same manipulation in her words. She apologized, but it didn't feel sincere. I couldn't listen to any more. I stood up, and without saying a word, I walked out of the room. My brother arrived just in time. He was furious. He grabbed my things and told everyone that he was disgusted by their behavior. We sat in his car until my husband and father arrived. By then, I was sobbing uncontrollably. My brother kept apologizing for not standing up for me sooner. He had been torn, but he finally understood. The next day, I sent an email to my family, including my lawyer's contact details. I told them that I never wanted to speak to them again. If they tried to contact me, I would involve the police. My mother, devastated, tried to convince my dad and brother to help fix things. But they were done. My dad was staying with my brother, and they both supported my decision. My mother, meanwhile, was hysterical. She felt like she had lost both of her daughters. The fallout was inevitable. The extended family got involved, some supporting me, others siding with my sister. The gossip spread like wildfire. Some mutual friends even contacted me, worried about my sister's well-being. She had started spreading rumors that my husband was keeping me away from the family, trying to manipulate the narrative in her favor. I couldn't stand having my personal life laid out for public consumption, but I felt it was the only way to set the record straight. I posted a long Facebook status detailing everything that had happened. I didn't want to hide it anymore. And it wasn't just for me, it was for my child who deserved to have boundaries respected. Despite everything, my mom reached out to me. She wanted to talk, to somehow make things right. But I had learned that this wasn't about fixing things on her terms. She couldn't just apologize and expect everything to go back to normal. I laid down some ground rules for future interaction. If she wanted to be part of my life, she would have to prove that she respected my boundaries, my choices, and my marriage. It wasn't easy. I still didn't know what to do about my mom. She had been a wonderful mom to me, but her actions had left a scar. I needed time to heal, and I wasn't sure if I could ever trust her again. For now, my family is fractured. My dad and brother are on my side, and they've apologized for not intervening earlier. My husband, who was always supportive, is more angry than ever. But for the sake of our child, I know that I have to be strong. The choices I make now will shape the kind of family I want to raise. I'm not sure what the future holds, but one thing I know for sure is that I can't go back to the way things were. Not with my sister, not with my mother. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm in control of my own life. What do you guys think about this whole story, or what would you do if you were in her shoes? Let me know in the comment section.